Hello, this is Anuja Matthew. Today I'd like to talk about children and COVID. Are they a specialized group of individuals who are protected from getting severe disease? Before I do that, I'd just like to go over some numbers from the CDC. As of September 12th, 2020, about 48 million tests or specimens have been tested for SARS coronavirus 2. And these are tests using a molecular assay or PCR assay that was reported to the CDC either by public health laboratories or other clinical or commercial laboratories. Of those 48 million tests, about 4 million tested positive. 8.3% of all the tests that were submitted to the CDC tested positive for SARS coronavirus 2. Here's a figure from the CDC where they compared hospitalization and death by age. So they used young adults, so adults between 18 and 29 years of age as the comparator group, and they're comparing to see if people younger than 18 or older than 18, how likely were they to be either hospitalized or die because of COVID symptoms or COVID disease. So if you look at hospitalization, young children 0 to 4 years or 5 to 17 years of age are have a much lower chance of being hospitalized compared to people with increasing age. And as you reach 75 or older, there's a much higher chance of you being hospitalized. Now, looking at deaths, again, the comparator group is between 18 and 29 years of age. The number of deaths are much lower in young children and children between 5 and 17 years of age. And as you increase in age, there's a much higher chance of you dying because of COVID disease. So once you're 85 and plus, there's about a 600-fold higher chance of you dying because of COVID. If you look at the number of cases by age group in the United States, it's not like there are very few cases in the young age group. So if you look at children between 0 and 4 years, there's at least about 90,000 cases of COVID infection. And if you look at children between 5 and 17 years of age, there's almost 327,000 cases. Of the 5 million, approximately 5 million cases they had where age group was available. So there's approximately 400,000 young children between 0 and 17 years of age who've tested positive for COVID. If you look at the number of deaths by age group, they had age group data available for about 143,000 individuals. We know now in the United States there's over 200,000 deaths. But if you look at the category that we're interested in to discuss today, that's children between 0 to 4 and children between 5 and 17, the number of deaths in this age group is far lower. So there's less than 100 deaths in children between 0 and 17 years of age. This is a review by Dr. Steinman's group where they discuss 5 or more possible reasons why children might have reduced susceptibility to COVID-19. I'd like to talk about them and also give you my perspective on some of their conclusions. So the first step is the nasal mucosa. In either adults or children, that's where the virus, SARS coronavirus 2, enters into humans. It's well known that children are most susceptible to respiratory infections. So young children, especially between 0 to 4 years of age, or even children from 5 to 17, are commonly infected with viruses that cause respiratory infections. These include common coronaviruses as well. And we've talked about this before, where every year many of us are exposed to these common coronaviruses. They cause colds and do not tend to cause very severe disease unless you have a pre-existing condition or are immunocompromised. So one thought is, because children have a lot more common coronaviruses, because of a process known as viral interference, these common coronaviruses, if they are co-infecting at the same time, will prevent SARS coronavirus 2 from entering into susceptible cells. In adults, on the other hand, we've been exposed to common coronaviruses but don't have it as much. And so perhaps SARS coronavirus 2 can enter far more efficiently and is less susceptible to viral interference. Another thought is adaptive immune responses, and a subset of the adaptive cells known as T cells are generated and are more commonly or present at higher levels in young children compared to adults. And these T cells are cross-react with SARS coronavirus 2. So they can see portions of SARS coronavirus 2. So these cross-reactive common cold virus T cells then are able to combat or kill virally infected SARS coronavirus 2 in children much better than in adults. So in adults, these T cells maybe die out after some time, and therefore they may not be able to control virally infected cells. So that's one thought. And the last thought is really the receptor expression. So it's been well documented that the main receptor for many of the SARS pathogens is ACE2. So there's some data to suggest that ACE2 expression changes with age. So here's a thought. If the cells in the nasal mucosa have less ACE2, then it's likely that virus can enter into these cells far less efficiently compared to, say, adults who have more ACE2 expression on the surface of their cells. I tend to think that that might not be the only answer, because ACE2 is also the receptor for some of the common cold coronaviruses. So if young children are susceptible to common cold viruses and use the ACE2 receptor, then decreased expression might not explain it. However, it's been shown, though, that common cold coronaviruses actually decrease ACE2 expression in vitro. So it's possible young children have common cold viruses. They enter into these cells, they downregulate ACE2, and so when children are then exposed to SARS-CoV-2, it might be then less likely to come in to enter susceptible cells. Another possibility brought up by Dr. Steinman's group is that in the lungs, so in the alveoli of the lungs, which is far lower compared to the nasal mucosa, on cells that are most susceptible to infection, which are type 2 alveolar epithelial cells, there's reduced expression of ACE2 receptors and additional receptors that are known to be important for SARS coronavirus entry and proteolysis and replication. So in children, using molecular techniques, it's been shown in some publications that there's lower expression of these receptors in children compared to adults. So that's a possibility. Another possibility is a certain type of immunity. As I had mentioned before, there are many kinds of T cells, and there are certain kinds of T cells that produce soluble factors or cytokines. And children tend to have cytokines that are more Th2 mediated, or these are cytokines that are typically not associated with intense inflammation. They're more correlated with asthma and eosinophilia. And in children, it's possible that these type 2 cytokines, or Th2 immunity, is protective against SARS coronavirus 2. And whereas in adults, the type of immunity that you generate is more Th1 kind of immunity, and that might be less protective. So that's a possibility. It's been shown in some studies that children who are asthmatics, or even adults who are asthmatics, actually have a lower chance of developing severe symptoms. And this correlates with the type of immune response or cytokines that asthmatics or children with allergies tend to secrete, and that might actually protect them from SARS coronavirus 2. And a final possibility is that children also then produce lower amounts of these inflammatory cytokines. A subset of children, as I've talked about in a lecture, develop or manifest this multisystem inflammatory syndrome, which is very severe, and some children have actually died from it. But most healthy children might have lower amounts of inflammatory cytokines. And one of the cytokines they talk about is IL-6 compared to adults who produce a large amount of IL-6. So all of these possibilities in children, all of these immune responses in children or lower expression of receptors might actually make them less susceptible to developing severe symptoms of disease. So while they get infected, and virus can replicate, it doesn't do so as efficiently as it happens in young adults and the elderly. So there are a lot of interesting possibilities why children might have milder outcomes. Having said that, whether children who are asymptomatic and who are major carriers of virus can actually spread disease to caregivers or teachers or parents or elderly grandparents is still not known. Many children during this pandemic, really from March to about September, were at home and they've now left shelter in place uh, and are returning to school. So we still don't know how this might impact the more vulnerable populations. While a common comorbidity in children has been congenital conditions, so people or young children who've had developmental delay or other genetic anomalies, the most common comorbidities in adults have been different. It's been hypertension and smoking. However, obesity, both in children and adults, has been a common comorbidity in developing severe COVID symptoms. So I'd like to end here and thank you again for your attention. If you need some more information on the multi-immune system cytokine response or Kawasaki disease that a subset of children develop, please look back at one of my lectures on Kawasaki disease. If you'd like to look up on T cells, I have a couple of lectures on T cells as well. Thank you again.